Hello, and thank you for joining us for our conversation on communities, climate action, and new U.S. leadership, with a focus on how the new White House's climate, energy, and environmental justice plans can translate to action at the local and tribal scale. My name is Angie Hacker. I'm CEO and Principal Consultant of Prosper Sustainably. I'll be moderating today's discussion and synthesizing some ideas and insights as we go through on a shared document, which you could follow at the link that was emailed to you in advance of this event, and a link that will be shared in the chat. I'm fortunate to work with each of the three impact-making organizations co-hosting today's event, who you're going to meet in just a moment, and we are very excited to welcome our esteemed guest, David Hayes, who was recently appointed as a Special Assistant to President Biden for Climate Policy. So welcome, David. We are overjoyed, by the way, to be welcoming also 600 community serving practitioners and experts that are registered for this event. They are participating from all walks of the United States, from Alaska to Delaware. So clearly, many of us are here because we want to accelerate meaningful climate action at the community scale in collaboration with new leadership at both the White House and in Congress. And if you're like me, you are seeing a dizzying amount of transformational federal policy and spending plans that are in the works right now. So it means it's a pivotal time to be connecting. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda for the next hour, and I want to start with introductions. First, I want to invite attendees to introduce yourself over chat and just take a moment to thank each of you for your leadership and commitment to protecting communities in your neck of the woods, especially amid the last year's crises and lingering budget challenges. The climate crisis facing all of us, and especially our frontline and historically disadvantaged communities in the United States, is obviously more enormous than we will tackle in this hour, but we hope there are more ways to engage on mutual goals. So before I introduce Mr. Hayes, I'm going to introduce each director of the co-hosting organizations for brief remarks. After we hear from Mr. Hayes, we are going to facilitate Q&A, so please feel free to submit questions anytime in the question box. So not in the chat, in the question box, please. So first up, I am pleased to introduce Beth Gibbons, Executive Director of the American Society of Adaptation Professionals. It was actually within ASAP's Policy and Practices member group that the idea for this event originated, so I'd like to recognize my fellow group leads and thank them for lending us their monthly regular meeting time. So John Phillips, Josh Foster, Anna McGinn, Joel Smith, who you'll hear from in a little bit, Gavin Dillingham, Jason Lady, and Hannah Tyker, as well as the stellar staff at ASAP, Rachel Jacobson and Brianna Nels. Okay, take it away, Beth.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angie. I really appreciate that tee up and appreciate so much what you put together here. As Angie said, I'm the Executive Director at the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, and I'm located on land that belongs to the Anishinaabe, including the Ottawa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi people, and the Wyandot, which is currently identified as the city of Ypsilanti, Michigan. ASAP connects and supports climate change adaptation and resilience professionals to advance innovative and just adaptation solutions throughout North America. We believe that climate change is a real and a serious danger to all sectors and systems, and that adaptation and resilience build stronger, more prepared communities, ecosystems, and economies, and that equity and environmental justice must be centered in all the work that adaptation professionals do. Successful adaptation requires holistic thinking and coordination from the federal down to the local level and across multiple sectors and disciplines. Gone is the time when we can attempt to deliver single issue solutions to our complex community challenges, and ASAP membership is broad and diverse as it's representative of that belief that we need to hear all voices from all corners to make sure we're discovering and replicating strategies that serve all of our communities. Our network is full of leaders and change makers with diverse backgrounds and lived experiences, those who are coming into this work who are young people seeking to move themselves and their communities out of harm's way, people who have decades of formal education and professional experience, and those who have lived and learned an ancestral knowledge that they bring forward through their adaptation work. I want to specifically thank Angie again and for organizing this, and ASAP's policy practice member group for their efforts and leadership defining ASAP's policy priorities, which you can see on the screen now. We're using these as a foundation for creating the enabling environment for adaptation solutions at all levels of government. And we believe that through supporting and connecting adaptation professionals, we can accelerate practice and bring forward a more just and equitable future. And we're really looking forward to working with the Biden-Harris administration to accelerate this important work together. So thank you, David, so much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you so much, Beth. We're going to move now to Dr. Shasta Gaughan. She's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and Environmental Director of the Polaband and Mission Indians, which administers the Tribal Climate Health Project, one of the co-hosts of this event, for which I actually serve as a lead consultant. So Shasta, up to you.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm very excited to be here. As Angie said, I am Shasta Gaughan. I am the Environmental Director, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Polaband of Mission Indians, and the Director of the Tribal Climate Health Project. We've been working on this project with Angie and Prosper Sustainably as our consultants since 2016, and it's very exciting that we've been able to develop this national, federally funded capacity building program. And Paula is the lead, Prosper is our partner, but our goal is to be able to develop a plan and a program for all tribes throughout the United States to be able to participate in and to learn from. We've been fortunate that over the last 4 years, when funding was a little bit harder to come by when it came to climate initiatives, that we have been able to benefit from EPA funding, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the National Indian Health Board through their funding partnership with the CDC. And our point with this project is to arm our tribal serving professionals with the ability to build climate resilience, and in particular with a focus on health and well-being, as well as community engagement. And we are attempting to make that easier for tribes through providing them with resources, teaching, training, so that all tribes can develop a vulnerability assessment and then an adaptation plan. And working together, we are able to build everybody's capacity to adapt to climate change. And it's my honor to be here today and speaking to you from the territory of the Payom people in what the colonizers named San Diego in California, and looking forward to our presentation today with David Hayes. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, I would like to introduce Kate Wright, Executive Director of the Local Government Commission, which administers the California Climate and Energy Collaborative. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Angie. Happy to be here for this critical and timely conversation. At the Local Government Commission, we have worked on climate and sustainability issues for almost 40 years. So we are really thrilled to see that these issues are given top priority within the Biden administration, and excited for this conversation. The Local Government Commission is a national organization based in California and run by and for local policymakers. We support over 700 leaders through events, technical assistance, and policy guidance. We work in 5 intrinsically connected program areas: climate change, community design, energy, water, and our Civic Spark National Service Program. We have a number of initiatives that offer technical assistance, peer learning, and best practices for local governments on climate change, including the ones listed on this slide. SEEK, the California Climate and Energy Collaborative, which supports California local governments to save energy, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and accelerate climate action. ARCA, the Alliance of Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation, which is a network of leading regional collaboratives from across California that works together to advance adaptation statewide and to increase local capacity to build community resilience. And finally, Civic Spark, a governor's initiative AmeriCorps program that we administer in partnership with California's Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And this program places over 100 fellows annually at project sites across California to build local government capacity to address emerging environmental and social equity resilience challenges such as climate change, water resource management, affordable housing, and mobility. So we are so excited to be here, excited to have such great participation from all over the nation. And we hope that we can work with you and utilize the resources of all of the groups represented here to advance the dialogue both nationally and at the ground level where a lot of this happens. So thank you so much, Mr. Hayes, for joining us and taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you so much to each of the three co-hosting organizations for your unwavering work on climate change in communities and for helping to pull together this conversation. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. David Hayes, who's encouraged us to call him David, and he's graciously agreed to share his insights on the topics that the three co-hosts raised, which are on your screen on the left. And after his remarks, I'll moderate some facilitated questions, like I said, first from the co-hosts and then from those that submit your questions in advance through that Q&A box. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. David Hayes is Special Assistant to the President for Climate Policy. He is a senior member of the National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy's White House team, which is advancing the Biden administration's climate conservation and clean energy priorities. And before that, he was the executive director of the State Energy and Environmental Impact Center at the NYU School of Law. And he has also served roles as Deputy Secretary and Chief Operating Officer at the U.S. Department of Interior for Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, among a long list of other very prestigious roles, which I will drop in our links, the full bio. Thank you, David. I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you, Angie, for that generous introduction, and I'm only sorry that the folks out there have to look both at a picture of me and me talking at the same time. That's a little much. But Angie, thanks for helping moderate this and put this thing together, and also for the organizers, Beth Gibbons, Kate Wright, and Shasta Gaughan. It's exciting for me to be talking to so many climate practitioners out there from all around the country. You all know how serious the climate crisis is, and you're committed to combating it. Your work is absolutely vital, and I'm particularly pleased because prior to taking this job, as Angie mentioned, I was with the State Impact Center at NYU and worked very closely with many of the progressive states and progressive cities and counties that during the Trump years were showing the way on climate and continue to do so. And many of you kept at it during those tough 4 years. And now the sun is coming up again. And I want to talk a little bit about why we should be encouraged and what we can do together. And as an introductory point, in addition to talking about the importance of states and cities, I want to say a special word about tribes. From my time at the Department of the Interior, where I worked with many, many tribes around the country, I know how important tribal self-government is and tribes' fierce commitment to their homelands and to the lands and waters that have sustained them from time immemorial. And it's no surprise that tribal communities are on the front lines of the fight against climate change, and I salute all of you for it. So I'm now excited to be working with President Biden in the White House. What you see in the background is not the White House. Most of us are still remote. We're starting to thaw a little bit, and I go down to the White House a couple of times a week, and within, I'm told, 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be down there all the time. But I also had the honor of working on the campaign and on the transition effort even before the election, and then after it, the run up to the January 20th inauguration. And I've been inspired for the last many months here, from the beginning really of Joe Biden's run for president, about his recognition that climate is one of the 4 crises that we are dealing with, including the coronavirus crisis, the economic crisis, and the racial reckoning that is underway in our nation. And to state the obvious to all of you, but important to dwell on, climate has never been prioritized in this way, not even close. And also the way the president talks about climate is it's not as an isolated, abstract policy issue, but intertwined with our way of life, including the vitality of our economy, our health, and the inequities in our society. The president, in terms of the economy, for example, says that climate to him means jobs. And he recognizes that to fight climate, we need to transition to a clean energy economy. We need to build new wind and solar facilities, new transmission lines, develop whole new industrial complexes with major new supply chains, like we are beginning to see unfolding, for example, in the Northeast with the birth of a vibrant offshore wind industry. And some of you may have tuned into the major announcement we had Monday of this week on that score. We also need to innovate as a country, put America's entrepreneurial spirit to work in improving battery technology and so much more. And while we transition to a clean energy society, we need to address the inequities that are all around us. And that is something else that the president has done with climate, is embedded climate in the broader societal needs. It's really the concept behind the Green New Deal, reformulated in a Joe Biden way. But what he talks about a lot, and which I'll get into a little more detail, is the need to recognize environmental injustice that's prevalent throughout America. Fence line communities have disproportionately borne the brunt of unhealthy pollution from fossil fuel burning power plants and other industries for decades. And that's simply unacceptable. We need to stop that pollution while ensuring that the next wave of economic opportunity associated with clean energy benefits those communities too. And we need to lend a hand to the coal and other distressed communities that helped build America, but are now suffering with job losses and lack of opportunity. We cannot leave them behind. We owe it to them. And you'll see that's part of the president's climate plan too. And finally, we need to acknowledge and address the serious impacts that climate is having on us. This is the work that many of you are so focused on. You know more than most, and perhaps more than any, how our coasts are being battered by rising seas and storm surges, how climate-infused hurricanes and other severe weather events, historic floods, hard freezes, heat waves, and droughts that lead to catastrophic wildfires, they're sickening and killing Americans and our friends all around the world. So the climate issue is more than just climate. It's about our health, our livelihood, our very society. And the president has recognized that from the start. And when I say the start of his administration, because on day one, President Obama issued an executive order that focused on climate. It took on, as promised, the worst of the Trump anti-climate rollbacks. It ordered that the EPA reinstate controls on oil and gas methane emissions, that EPA go back and revisit the oil and truck mileage standards that had been weakened by President Trump, that it go back and reinstate energy efficiency requirements on our appliances. And in fact, it required all agencies to look at literally every decision that had been made in the Trump administration and revisit them with an eye toward whether they need to be reversed or not. It also, this is very important for many of the tribal representatives on the call, it called for the restoration of our national monuments. And next week, Secretary Holland of the Interior Department is going to Utah to do a promised consultation with state officials and a government-to-government consultation with the tribes involved in Bears Ears National Monument, with then a report going to the president regarding the potential restoration of those national monuments. It also stopped the development of oil and gas in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, revoked the permit for the Keystone Pipeline, and put back into consideration for rulemakings the social cost of carbon so that climate costs would be taken into account for regulatory activities. So that was day one. 7 days later, a second executive order came out, even more comprehensive, focused on climate. That executive order on the 27th of January put climate at the center of U.S. foreign policy and national security. On day one, he had agreed to go back into Paris. This executive order set up, for example, the Leaders Summit that the president will be hosting on Earth Day later this month with climate leaders from around the world, hosted by Special Climate Envoy John Kerry, with whom we work very closely. That executive order also established my office, the Climate Office in the White House, headed up by National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy and Deputy Ali Zaidi. And it established the National Climate Task Force, a cabinet-level task force chaired by National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy that brings a whole of government approach to climate. This is really remarkable. I've been in the government before, in the Clinton administration, the Obama administration. Never have I seen an effort as comprehensive as this to bring all the agencies into climate issues because they're all involved. Climate, again, is not the province of EPA and Interior and the Department of Energy only. No, it's a health issue. So it's the health it's the Department of Health and Human Services has to be involved. It's also an issue that affects our Defense Department. And by the way, the Defense Department can help us with clean energy on the other side of the coin. And that executive order also laid out a number of specific policies to be pursued out of the White House, out of the Climate Office, in which I'm honored to be part of, including things like organize the federal buying power to help lift up the renewable energy industry, get more clean energy from public lands and offshore waters. And I mentioned that announcement on Monday, where we now have a goal of getting 30,000 megawatts of new clean energy from offshore, including the offshore Atlantic and the offshore Pacific. Putting a pause on oil and gas development on public lands. We're going to have a report here in a couple of months from the Interior Department to reform the entire oil and gas program that the federal government operates, because it's been it's been a giveaway basically, and is not protective of our public lands and our environmental ethics. Ending fossil fuel subsidies. Pertinent to many of you, requiring federal agencies to adopt climate action plans, getting back that muscle memory that has been lost in the last 4 years, and having federal agencies identify vulnerabilities to their mission areas and develop the climate plans, much as many of your jurisdictions are doing, your tribes are doing, your local governments are doing for your own interests. Also importantly, that executive order called on federal agencies to develop data and information products to help you, federal agencies and you as in everybody in America, or at the state level, local level, tribal level, to identify climate vulnerabilities and get access to climate-related information that'll help state, local, tribal governments in climate planning and resilience activities. I hope we talk about this a little bit more in the Q&A, because it's really an important function that the federal government can provide, not to make your decisions, but to help you make the right decisions when it comes to adaptation. Also, that executive order called for the creation of a civilian climate corps, which is very exciting, and I'm sure many of you have been are interested to learn more about this. The idea is to mobilize the next generation of conservation and resilience workers and maximize the creation of accessible training opportunities and good jobs. The idea is to basically consolidate the concept of conservation corps that is now in a much smaller way scattered through the federal government and also many state governments. Bring it together and build it up. And in fact, to jump ahead, in the president's jobs plan, which he just announced in Pittsburgh a couple of days ago, he's asking Congress for $10 billion to fund this civilian climate corps. This is no small potatoes here. Also, that executive order on January 27th said we're going to work toward the goal of conserving at least 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. So there's a huge conservation piece to the climate agenda. And a report will be coming out later this month, as required under that executive order, that's going to lay out some principles for how we should approach this audacious goal of conserving 30% of our lands and 30% of our waters for conservation. And you're going to really like that report when it comes out, because it's going to focus on the fact that this has got to be a bottom-up approach for this to work. And the notion being that we have to have a people-centered approach to how to provide access to all for the outdoors, to expand access for hunting and fishing, to address the racial and economic disparities in access to nature, and most importantly, to support locally led and locally designed conservation efforts. We're going to have, and already have had, a lot of outreach under the 30 by 30 plan. I hope we talk some more about that as well. But the focus is going to be on locally adopted conservation approaches, voluntary efforts from private landowners. We're going to honor tribal sovereignty and support the priorities of tribal nations in this process, and develop conservation tools that create jobs, power economies, improve public health. So this is a very important initiative for many of you who are on this webinar. I'm almost done here, but this is the very meaty executive order. If you haven't read it, you should, January 27th. The other piece of this executive order gets to the equity point and the distressed communities point of not leaving any communities behind. In terms of the distressed communities, the executive order set up an interagency working group on coal and power plant communities and economic revitalization. A report is going to come out soon, literally within a week or two on that. And also environmental justice. A White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council was set up. And as you may have heard on Monday, the first ever White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council meeting they had their first meeting on Monday. That was announced, the membership of that EJ Council, Special White House EJ Council. So let me just say a couple more words and then open it up. Some of you may say, well, these are all nice words, but what's really behind it? And what you heard from the president in Pittsburgh on Wednesday is there's a lot behind this, that we're not done just using the current resources that we have through current programs, current budgets, et cetera. The president had just announced a very bold American jobs plan that focuses on investing in American infrastructure to revitalize our economy and, among other things, address the climate crisis as a key portion and principle behind the jobs plan. And I invite you to go on the White House website and take a look at the extensive fact sheet, 25 pages long, single-spaced, that outlines a number of the elements of this infrastructure program. And what you're going to find in it is that climate is shot through the entire infrastructure initiative. And to bring it home to many of you who are focused on adaptation and resilience issues, there's a recognition that nature-based infrastructure is a key part of America's infrastructure. And while we need to adapt our physical infrastructure to the climate crisis and be smart in how we plan for and deal with the reality that climate is impacting our coasts and our weather and our droughts, et cetera, our wildfires. In addition, if we invest in nature-based infrastructure, we can be have a more resilient landscape that helps communities and our ecosystems. And I'm going to read just one long paragraph from the fact sheet that illustrates what the president is saying here in this jobs plan. Here's the paragraph. The lead sentence is maximize the resilience of land and water resources to protect communities and the environment. President Biden's plan will protect and, where necessary, restore nature-based infrastructure, our lands, forests, wetlands, watersheds, and coast and ocean resources. Families and businesses throughout the U.S. rely on this infrastructure for their lives and livelihoods. President Biden is calling on Congress to invest in protection from extreme wildfires, coastal resilience to sea rise and hurricanes, support for agricultural resources and management and climate-smart technology, and the protection and restoration of major land and water resources like Florida's Everglades and the Great Lakes. Additionally, the president's plan provides funding for the Western drought crisis by investing in water efficiency and recycling programs, at tribal water settlements and dam safety. President Biden's plans will empower local leaders to shape these restoration and resilience project funds in line with the Outdoor Restoration Force Act. So I'll close here. And as you can tell, I hope the administration is moving out very aggressively on a very robust and historic climate agenda. We're using all the administrative tools we have in our toolbox to accelerate the transition to clean energy, to address harmful pollution and other environmental injustices, and push adaptation strategies across the board, including by building more resilient conventional infrastructure and recognizing and investing in nature-based infrastructure. Passage of this Jobs Act is a key ingredient in advancing this aggressive agenda, and we will look forward to your help and support on this. And I look forward to our discussion right now on all of these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. And I just want to relay that I've heard from a lot of community climate practitioners that are genuinely excited about this administration's early appointments, statements, actions. It's clear that there are some very thoughtful and experienced climate leaders like you taking a forward-thinking and nuanced approach to climate change. So with that, I want to actually just get ourselves to our facilitated questions slide, if you don't mind, Serena, and encourage folks who haven't yet submitted a question to go ahead and please do that on the Q&A box. We have received some questions, and we're going to be selecting from the ones we've received, but continue to submit them, please. We're going to go ahead and turn to our co-host first. So I would like to first welcome Joel Smith. Joel Smith is one of the members of the ASAP Policy Practices Group. He's a member of the ASAP group, and he's going to ask the first question on behalf of ASAP. He's an independent researcher with decades of work in adaptation, including with the IPCC. So Joel, do we have you with us?
Angie, I'm going to kick it over to Beth. Joel let me know he had a call in, so he's not going to be able to ask.
Okay, go ahead, Beth.
All right. Well, first, I just want to say thank you, David. I think that was a great overview of what's happening. And I think that you opened the door for some places that everybody's like kind of eager to dive deeper into. And so the question that Joel wanted to have asked is, the Biden-Harris administration has set bold goals on mitigation to get us into net zero GHG by mid-century. Does the administration have plans to set targets or goals for adaptation, including defining what a well-adapted society looks like, determining a timeline for reaching that goal, and identifying how much it'll cost and who should pay? And as we think about those, how can ASAP be of assistance to the administration in setting those goals and planning for adaptation so that we can measure what we are doing and our success in achieving the goals?
That's an excellent question. I will say that right now our primary focus has been on because we've re-entered Paris, and the international community has been identifying what our goals are to work with the international community to address the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And as I mentioned, we have the Leaders Summit coming up on Earth Day, where the U.S. will be presenting a new NDC, nationally determined commitment, that identifies where, how much we are planning to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, which is obviously the end of this decade. We're going to have a very aggressive goal. And that's been, frankly, our primary focus in terms of goals right now. The president has already said that he's going to go to zero climate electricity by 2035, which is phenomenal. And of course, we're looking to in addition to having a clean electricity grid, we're looking to electrify our vehicles as much as we can, et cetera. The adaptation piece is harder in some sense. I hesitate to say that because it's incredibly hard to figure out how, as an economy, we shift quickly enough to the clean energy side to be able to meet these aggressive goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But you all know as professionals that the adaptation, we are learning as we go in adaptation, and there's no kind of one size fits all. Even on what you might a category of adaptation like coastal resilience, the menu of alternative ways to make our coast resilient is changes with geography, with culture, with community interests, et cetera. So we're gonna, and also precisely because it's place-based, we need to get from the ground up inputs into how best to quantify the need and much less identify the goal. So we've got a lot more work to do collectively to get there. And the final point I guess I'll make is I mentioned that we're looking to have better data and better data sharing opportunities between the federal government and those of you on the ground. And I hope that'll provide a good vehicle for helping us aggregate up the needs and the approaches.
Yeah, I think that space where we meet between the local knowledge and the experience and the just unparalleled kind of resource and role for the federal government to be playing is really important, that we keep these conversations open. I think I learned from the adaptation community and to a takeaway from the COVID crisis, so much can be handled at the local level, but strong federal leadership is irreplaceable. And so while we deeply respect the unique conditions in each place and that local experience, we are really looking forward to and seeking federal leadership and excited to meet you there so that we can find solutions and support them together.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, I'll just mention parenthetically, I was on a call, I put together a call this week with a number of the key agencies dealing on coastal resilience issues. We had FEMA on the call, the Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, Interior, Agriculture, and HUD, which of course has a huge portfolio here of grants. And it's clear that we can do way better in terms of providing leadership in the granting process, for example, to collect data, to tell the story. We need a clearinghouse basically to help share information. There's a lot to be done there, and we're excited to get started on that. We've only been in office 2 months, but we're anxious to get moving on the adaptation side.
That's great.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, David. We're going to move on to Shasta with the Tribal Climate Health Project for her question.
Thank you, Angie. And David, I have a complicated question for you that I'm actually going to try to simplify a little bit. And I've been looking in the questions and seeing some of my dedicated tribal colleagues like Nikki Cooley from the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals and Stefan Tangen from the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center, Anne Marie Chischilli, Executive Director for ITEP. And, and they have questions that go along with my question. And, we've gotten funding from the NIHB, from CDC, and we're trying to learn lessons from COVID-19 and be able to apply them to climate adaptation. And we know from the disparate impacts of COVID-19 that there are specific barriers that tribes face in terms of access to healthcare, housing, broadband internet services, clean water. That led to disproportionate COVID illness and death, both in urban and rural native populations. And we see the same thing happening with climate change. So in light of that, what kind of specific federal actions can the administration support to help tribes and other frontline communities get access to the services and the infrastructure and the resources they need, not just for crises like COVID, but for all of these upcoming climate crises?
Excellent question, and I offer several different perspectives here. And this is an area where we hope to use the whole of government approach, which I mentioned before, to good benefit. And it's particularly important here because, as you know, and as your question infers, there's not one department or one agency on the federal side that's the answer. It's several working together, hopefully, with tribes and identifying the needs and opportunities. But a few data points I'll mention. That second executive order on January 27th requires the Department of Health and Human Services, which of course includes the Indian Health Service and the CDC, et cetera, to set up a new office called the Office of Climate Change and Equity, reporting directly to Secretary Javier Becerra, and to pull together the health and the climate impacts under the broad umbrella of HHS, an agency with incredible breadth and strength in the health area and health delivery systems. So I think that new office is going to be really important. We're looking to find leadership for it right now with the help of presidential personnel, and I think they'll be an important new player. And obviously, IHS is an important player. In terms of the broader issues of adaptation, the Department of the Interior is very focused, I know, on respecting tribal needs in this area and ensuring and providing resources for tribes to be able to access funds and expertise and to work together on identifying vulnerabilities and developing adaptation plans and that sort of thing. But I know that other agencies like NOAA and others are also interested, and part of the challenge that we are finding is that in the last 4 years, these programs have been starved or never developed, and we're trying to to get them going again and get them coordinated. But this is going to be an important area where all of you should be advocates for and push the federal government for us to do more here. But I can assure you that in the White House, we're very focused on these issues, and we're going to do our best to bring the resources to bear that are needed for tribal communities as well as other communities, obviously.
Thank you for that. And you know my email address, so.
Yes, I have it. And Brian Newland is going to be the new Assistant Secretary I guess he's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Newland Affairs, for Indian Affairs at Interior. And he's a close friend and a wonderful tribal leader, and looking forward to working with him a lot on these issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Shasta. And last but not least, Kate with Local Government Commission has another question. Then we're going to turn it to the audience questions, which we've received 66 of. So we will be judicious and get to probably 2 or 3.
Great, thanks. So David, I'm curious to hear, I mean, this is a very impressive agenda and so much momentum already. And I'm wondering, how are you going to coordinate across agencies to ensure that not just the climate programs that we're looking at have obviously that lens, but also that all investments are made in a way that takes into consideration climate resilience and mitigation as well. So we have the climate task force that's really exciting. And I'm wondering if you anticipate having something equivalent to the Partnership for Sustainable Communities in California. We have the Strategic Growth Council that operates in a similar function and has done a really good job at interagency grant programs and technical assistance to ensure that when we think about housing, we are connecting that to our transportation investments and decisions, and all through a lens of resilience. So can you dive a little bit deeper in how that interagency piece will work and how we can look at climate resilience in all investments?
Yes. There are a couple of important ways we're doing it. One is it's a little bit inside baseball, but those of you who have worked with the federal government know how important the budget office is, or if you worked in any government, you know how important the budget office is. The Office of Management and Budget in the White House complex, of course, has the budget component in it, and the budget office has typically been segmented by sort of clusters of agencies with a specific principal deputy doing work for 3 or 4 major cabinet agencies, another doing another 3 or 4. We now have a climate-oriented principal administrator at OMB who is looking at budgets across the agencies and thinking about climate. And in fact, today, the administration is releasing its proposed budget agenda for fiscal year 22. And I invite you to look at when you can find it online, which may be as soon as today. Look and see how climate is infusing programs across the federal government. And it's because of this very conscious effort to have OMB's budget operation be cross-cutting to look at climate issues. There also the National Environmental Policy Act, which is, of course, the key law that is used to evaluate and consider alternatives for projects that involve federal money or federal permits. The first executive order actually required that in connection with implementing NEPA, that climate impacts be taken into account for all projects. And I was literally on a Zoom call before this with folks at the Council for Environmental Quality, which implements NEPA, talking about how to make sure that we deal with the fact that Trump tried to restrain NEPA and roll back aspects of it and reinfuse it with the climate considerations that are so important. And we have a pathway to do that, and will do that. And then finally, I guess, I would mention that on a less systemic effort way, but a practically important way, we in the White House Climate Office are pulling together the agencies where we see overlap and the need for cooperation, and are just taking it on ourselves to make sure those agencies are working together. The climate resilience meeting or coastal resilience meeting I had earlier this week is just an illustration of that. But this will be, having been in government before, and many of you are in governments, whether it be tribal governments or local governments or whatever, this is always a challenge, right? To get the parties talking together, to make sure everyone knows what they're doing, and to pull together to understand and help to implement in a mutually supportive way important policies like adaptation. So it'll be a work in progress, but we're giving it a high priority, and it's very consistent with one of the president's highest priorities. So that really helps as well.
I think to that, if I could add in, I think David, here it's so important too that talking across the federal agencies, but then also getting input from this kind of community and like the intermediaries that we represent. Because as you know, adaptation and resilience work has been taking place on the ground over the 4 years against the odds of having an unresponsive Fed. And now it's important that those views of how programs have been applied comes back up so that we're not just feeling like something new has to get built when there's trust and relationships and action that can be really amplified and built upon.
Well, yes, and we'd love your ideas in how best to capture that learning that you guys have been doing, and including obviously, you know, many of us have had worked with and worked in and have relationships with states and local governments, et cetera, tribal governments. But to the extent that you guys can help us, you have my email address now, organizers of this, and we would welcome your ideas on how we have to tap into that. And as it is, you know, a lot of the federal funding is not just is really grants to the states and working out there. So how do we use that mechanism to help you and help others understand what's working and what is not? This is not a case where the federal government can ever be or should be sort of the telling people what to do. It's more hopefully facilitating it, and that means getting the information flowing up as you're pointing out. So we want your ideas in that respect, please.
You know, let's keep on that topic because a bunch of people in the question box are on that, and they really want to see some continued engagement there. And people are asking, you know, Susie Moser, Tonya Graham, several people, more specifically, how can we share those ideas? Thank you for offering your email address. You're amazing. What specific ways, what channels are there that we can help inform this process as communities?
Well, I'll offer a few thoughts, and this is something we should have some follow-up on with the organizers here of this terrific event. I think, you know, one of the agencies that is really extremely good in terms of and set up well to help facilitate a back and forth is NOAA in the Department of Commerce. NOAA, because of their science focus and their the fact that Weather Service is there, et cetera, they are really up on climate issues and very involved in adaptation efforts. And in this recent conversation I was having with them, you know, their phones are ringing off the hook, which is a good thing. They're getting questions from many of you, et cetera. They're seen as an important collaborator on these issues. So the executive order calls out NOAA actually to help on providing information products on resilience and adaptation issues. So we're going to be looking to NOAA to have a big role in this, but also, you know, the Agriculture Department has these climate hubs that are going to get a lot more funding now in the next budget. The Department of Interior has landscape conservation cooperatives backed by regional science centers that I helped set up in the early Obama years. These organizations are going to spring back to life, and they're also, I think, very useful mechanisms to help share information on a regional and local level. I think we have to use all these tools because it's not like one collaboration here. It's got to be, we've got to have a lot of activity and back and forth happening.
Thank you, David. And actually, Serena, if you could get us to the next slide. A lot of people are asking for certain things. Yes, the slides, the recordings will all be available, and the chat will also be available too, because a lot of people have good comments in the chat. I'm also going to be sending David all of the questions we've received, which are now up to 74. So he will hear what you have asked, even if we didn't get to everything. But I do hope most of those questions were asked within the other questions. And I do think maybe the big thing to sort of highlight here is there's so much appetite for continued collaboration, and it's often, I'm hearing from lots and lots of folks in the questions, sometimes it's difficult just to know who to speak with, even though it's so natural and necessary for us to connect. And is there some way it sounds like Noah is perhaps one way, and if we debrief, perhaps we can come up with other solutions.
Well, there's one other important thing that will happen soon, which is we will have a resilience director appointed soon in the Council for Environmental Quality, CEQ, which is affiliated with the White House. So that person it'll be his or her job to help to be a focal point for this. And as soon as that, we're still hiring up here. we're all of 2+ months into this, and it's been a whirlwind. But I know that we're in the final stages of selecting that resilience director. So that person will be the logical person. I'd love to be it myself, but I can't. I mean, I'm working on, the entire portfolio of climate issues, and I have a natural draw toward the resilience piece because of my conservation-oriented background. But I'm also spending a lot of time talking about transmission lines and hydrogen and all kinds of stuff. But we'll get that information out as soon as the director is appointed, and I think that'll provide the natural glue here that will help our conversation continue.
Well, thank you, David. And so I think that summarizes some of the key points of today, where we really are just landing on. There's so much to discuss. We are so grateful for your time. You are so busy, and we very much appreciate you spending the time with us. And if we could just find a way to make the link with all of this interest and all of this expertise and experience with the right folks at the federal government, we can align with some important mutual goals and really move communities further faster. And so I just want to say a few words about the final, about staying connected. And Serena, if you can go to the next slide. If folks do want to connect with Local Government Commission, there are several ways to do that. That's also in the live notes. All the links are in the live notes, and you will receive these slides with live links. The Tribal Climate Health Project also invites you to join their listserv and an event on tribal well-being adaptation, which is happening later on this month. And ASAP invites you to join the policy practice group and to join as a member. And finally, I just want to say thank you to everybody and invite David to provide any final remarks about our conversation today.
I just want to thank the organizers for this webinar opportunity, and it's nice to virtually meet all of you out there, and I hope you will support the president. I know you believe in these issues, but in particular, obviously the jobs plan that was announced on Wednesday. We need the Congress's help here to strengthen the authority and to provide the funding needed for all of this work, and with resilience and adaptation being an important pillar of it. So I hope you can support the agenda. And thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to step out for an hour here and spend time with you.
We're hearing there's trouble in the Capitol today, so please stay safe, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you to all the co-hosts, and thank you so much to all of the attendees. We will be following up for those that are registered with some information about how we might continue the conversation. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Angie. Thank you,
Thank you.
David. Bye.